Amen.
Amen. Oh, amen. Oh, amen. If you are here, please unmute and respond. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, amen.
Amen.
So, as we already know, for the past 2 days, we've been online because of our National Permanent Week celebration. And today is a different activity. The past 2 days, we've heard about what it takes to be who an unleashed man is and how an unleashed man can transform their world. Today is a different activity, as we already know. We are here to have knowledge. We are here to understand the immigration situation that we all find ourselves in the land of Czech Republic. And if the IT guys can help me out, project the speaker for the day. So if you can help me out with the details of the speaker for the day as I speak. So the the speaker for today is our brother Jan Kalina, who is the co-founder and owner of Move to Prague Relocation Services. It is a company that provides advice and legal services also to people in Czech Republic and those who want to move to Czech Republic as well. So he's well vested into issues of immigration, and also he's well vested in the legalities that are required for you to stay here safe without going through some challenges. And today we've been blessed to have him online with us, and he's going to take us through some of how we can navigate through some of the difficulties that we face as foreigners in the land of Czech Republic. So without wasting much time, I will invite our brother Jan. If Jan, you are online, please take the podium and we can start with our Q&A. Thank you, and God bless us all. And just before the speaker comes in, please, the speaker is going to take us through the first Q&A sessions based on the questions that we've already shared. We shared a link with you to share your questions with us. So the speaker will take us through this set of questions. And then when we are done, we will also open the window for us all to either orally ask a question, so you can raise your hand and I'll call you to ask your question, or you can also type your question in the chat and I'll be reading out to us to the speaker to also answer to us all. So God bless you. Brian, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much all for joining. So I will start with the first questions that we've already collected, and I will try to answer them as best I can. But those are all a bit kind of complicated topics, and it also depends, there is no answer that fits all, because even if you have kind of a similar situation, even if you're just of a different nationality, or you applied at a different time for the same type of visa, things can be different because the immigration law changes, and also the ministry kind of sees every nationality a bit differently. So I will do my best to explain, but if you have any additional questions, or if something is not really clear, please ask. Ideally in the last section, when there will be an open Q&A session. But I'm here for the next 2 hours, so please use that 2 hours fully, so you get all your answers, because that's the reason why I'm here, to provide clarity. And maybe some of you have already seen me before on the YouTube, or maybe you've worked with us before in Move to Prague, so you know that I put everything in the way it really is, or as close to it. So I will do the same thing here as well. So I will not try to like just say some general things and how it should work, but I'll try to give you also the realistic picture of how it really works with the Ministry of the Interior in real life. So that was kind of a long introduction, but the point is I'm here for you, so use the time. I'll do my best to make this worth your time being here. So let's go through the first 10 questions. There are basically, say, 5 or 6 topics among these first 10 questions. So I will put the questions that are topically together, and I'll answer those. Then we'll go through the rest of the questions. I'll go through all that there. They're also kind of topic related. And then we'll open the discussion if something was not clear or if something was not answered, I'll be happy to do it then. So first 10 questions. Let's start with, I'll do it like that. So employee card, the first. So if the question is, if one is on an employee residence permit, in case of loss of job, how many days is allowed to get a new job if one has no access to the labor market or if one has access to the labor market? So if you are, there are 2 types of an employee card. The standard one is so-called dual employee card. Dual because it combines 2 things. It combines your ability to work in the Czech Republic, and that's usually for one specific employer and one specific position, and your ability to stay in the Czech Republic. So it's ability to work, ability to stay. That's why it's dual employee card. That's the standard type. The other is if you, for some reason, have free access to the labor market, so you don't need a permission to work in the Czech Republic, you just need a permission to stay here. So this typically happens when you graduate from a Czech university, an accredited program, and then you get a job and you apply for the employee card already having a Czech diploma. So these are 2 different types of employee cards, and basically all the rules are different there, including the change of employer. So if we stick to the standard one, which probably most of you have or are aware of, so that's the dual one, where you did have to go through the process of getting the job advertisement and the vacancy number, and you can only work at one position. There are kind of many rules which you need to stick to if you want to change employers. First thing is that you should generally stay with the first employer for 6 months before you can change the job. This only applies to the first job, and there are some exceptions, but generally, if you come to the Czech Republic, get the employee card, and you should stay with the first employer for 6 months. Then, if you lose a job, be it that you are fired or be it that you just want to go somewhere else, then you have 60 days to find a new job and report it to the Ministry of the Interior. There are other rules, like, for example, the new employer cannot be an agency. The new employment must be reported at least 30 days before the planned start of the new job. So there are plenty of different rules, but the main question is here, how many days is allowed to be without a job? So generally speaking, for the standard employee card, it's 60 days. Those start counting from the official termination date in your termination agreement or the leaving notice or whatever is the type of termination. So from that date, the last day of your job, the 60 days start counting. Because it can be there can be a difference. For example, you still have a couple days of vacation left, so you actually quit going to the office like on the 15th of the month, but your employment contract actually terminates at the end of the month. So there can be some difference, but the 60 days start counting from the date when your employment officially ended. If you are under the non-dual employee card, so that's the one where you can work freely, there is no really a rule like this. We still recommend to our clients to stick to the 60 days because that's kind of the safe option. generally speaking, you should always fulfill the purpose of your stay in the Czech Republic. And if you have the employee card, the purpose of your stay is employment. So if you're unemployed, then you're not fulfilling the purpose of your stay. So technically speaking, the most amount or the longest amount of time you can be without the job would be like half of the validity of the employee card. But that would be kind of risky. So we always advise our clients to stick to the 60 days anyway. But if it's not possible, should not matter. But you need to keep in mind that you still need to fulfill the purpose of your stay. So that's, if all the answers will be this long, it will probably not be enough to be here for 2 hours. So I'll try to keep it a bit shorter. So employee card, that was one topic. What do we have here? PR. So the permanent residency, let's do that. I'll be just crossing the ones that are done. So is it mandatory for all foreigners to pass A2 Czech language before they can apply for the permanent residency? Are there other options? That's a good question. That's usually what people struggle with when they're applying for the permanent residency. All the other documents are fine, like accommodation, income, all that, but usually the language is the thing. Generally speaking, yes, you always need to get the A2 language exam. You don't have to do it if you are a child below 15 years of age. So if you're applying for your child, then below 15 years of age, they don't have to pass the exam. If you're above 60 years of age, you don't have to do it either. Then there is an exception if you, that probably doesn't apply to anyone who's watching, and I don't think I've seen it in real life anyway, but if you had some, let's say, mental or health issues that would prevent you from learning a new language, then you could potentially also not do the exam, but you would need to prove that you have that condition. So it might be a bit difficult anyway. Potentially also if you studied at least for 1 year in Czech language, but it means like an official school, like a primary school or a high school or university where the language of study was Czech. And if you can prove it, then that would potentially also make you accept from the language exam. And there are also potentially other options that you can, if you already have some other exam which is relevant or like comparable with the A2, then you could potentially use that as well. But that generally, that's not very common either. But for example, if you were a doctor and you were already you already had to pass a language exam for being a doctor in the Czech Republic, then you could potentially use the exam for the PR as well. So there are some exceptions, but besides being too old and being too young, the other options are not that common. So that was one. Other PR option or other PR question: if one of the spouses obtains a permanent residency, does the other spouse automatically qualify for permanent residence? And in case they have children, do the children automatically qualify for permanent residence? Not really. Definitely doesn't apply like that for spouses, because for spouses, there are some rules for the PR. And the general rule is that you need to be here for at least 5 years to be able to apply for the PR. There are some exceptions for that, but that usually also only applies to kids or some special cases. So generally speaking, for spouses, it does not really apply that if one of the spouses gets the PR, then that the other spouse gets the PR automatically as well, unless they've been living here together for 5 years and they both qualify. It's not like that in case of children. So what we've done in the past, for example, and it also depends on where you live actually. So potentially kids could apply with their parents. But what we did, for example, that we had an Indian client who was living here, had a PR already, and he had a daughter who still lived in India. And in that case, that's possible for the daughter to apply for the PR directly through the embassy. So we did that, and the daughter got the PR without ever being in the Czech Republic before. So that's possible. But other than that, you generally need to pass the 5 years. There are some other exceptions as well where it can go faster, but it mainly applies to couples where one of you is an EU citizen or a Czech citizen. So if one of you has a Czech spouse, then there would be potentially a faster way for the PR. But as a general rule, it's 5 years for adults. So that's PR. Other topics here, let's do trade license or family reunification. Maybe that's closer to what I've discussed now. So what are the legal documents and procedures required for me to apply to bring my child from Africa to the Czech Republic? Bringing Czech Republic, generally speaking, is a very tough country to get a visa for. Usually I do these kind of sessions physically, so I would ask the audience like directly how it was for you to get here at the first place, all that. I cannot see you, I cannot hear you now, so I'll not do that. But it would be interesting for me to hear how difficult or how easy was it for you all to get here. So maybe we can get to it in the open session. But generally speaking, Czech Republic is not the easiest country to get a visa for. So you need to really justify that you want to be here, why you want to be here, and that you're not coming here just to get an EU visa and be able to travel easily and stuff. You always need to prove that that you have a serious intention to do something here. But on the other hand, if one of you is already here, or if the main applicant is applying and the application is strong, or if the main applicant is already here, then bringing family is generally pretty simple, let's say, pretty straightforward, because Czech Republic respects family a lot. So if you're married and if you have kids, the Czech Republic does not really want to separate you. So the application to bring your family members, be it a spouse or be it a child, or children, then it's pretty straightforward and easy. Now, it's important to understand, because we'll touch the topic a bit later as well. Some of the questions are exactly about this topic, but generally, there are 2 ways of bringing your spouse or kids here. One would be a long-term visa with a family reunification purpose of stay, which is the sticker in your passport, maximum validity of 1 year, given to you directly by the embassy. And then the other option is a family reunification residence permit, which is a residence card, which probably most of you have already. So you can decide which one you want. There are some rules for that. What I often hear is that people say, hey, I read somewhere that I cannot bring my family sooner than after 15 months of living in the Czech Republic. So that might be true, but it only applies to the residence permit and only to some situations. You can always bring your family under the long-term visa. So you can all apply together, or if the main applicant comes here first, then the family members can always apply for the visa, for the long-term visa, for the sticker in your passport. There is no time limitation, so you don't need to wait for anything to apply for it. It has some advantages, some disadvantages. We'll probably go deeper into that when we get to the other questions. But you can always bring your family members, whatever type of visa, whatever type of residence permit you have here, you can bring your family members under the visa. One kind of disadvantage I want to mention here is that if you are bringing your spouse and you bring them under the visa, they are not allowed to work. They are only allowed to work when they get the residence permit. So that's usually the downside, but you can always bring your family under the visa. Then for the residence permit, there are some rules, and the main rules are about the amount of time you have to spend here to be able, or for your family members to be able to apply for the residence permit. The general rule is 15 months. So the main applicant would have to be here for 15 months to be able to bring their family members, or for the family members to be able to apply for the residence permit. Because as I mentioned, for the visa, there is no limitation, they can apply anytime. But for the residence permit, 15 months. But that generally applies only to business visa of the main applicant or for a student visa of the main applicant. So if you're here as a student, then your family members can only apply for the residence permit after 15 months of you being here. If you're here under the business visa, then it's the same situation. Your family members can get the residence permit only after 15 months of you being here. If you have an employee card, this amount of time is only 6 months. So you only need to be in the Czech Republic for 6 months for you to be able, or for your family members to be able to apply for the residence permit. If you, for example, have a blue card, then you can bring, or your family members can apply for the family reunification residence permit right away. There is no waiting time. So the 15 months, which people always find somewhere, because we get so many like questions or clients asking about that. So it must be somewhere, but that only basically applies to the residence permit and if the main applicant has a student visa, student's residence permit, or the business one. If you have an employee card, if you have a blue card, the rules are different. So that was the family reunification topic. Now, trade license. That's one of my favorite topics. Most of them are. So I can talk about it for hours, but trade license. Now, in case one has a trade license and for some reason is not using it, does he or she still have to pay for social, health insurance, and taxes on the trade license? It's, you know, the thing is that, because, okay, just a side thing. Some of our clients sometimes ask us for some like certainty or some like clear answer. Okay, this is my situation. Tell me 100% what will happen. The thing is that in the immigration, there is nothing 100%. We've tested this many times. We had, for example, 3 clients from the same country doing the same work, living in the same apartment. We applied with them for the same type of residence permit, and all the 3 processes went completely differently. They were all applied, but between the first one approved, between the first one approved and the last one approved, there were a couple months difference. And the actual process was very different as well, because many things depend also on the decision maker. So there is no like certain answer for anything. There is one thing which is written in the law that should be followed. But then there is the decision maker who can make the following of the law very difficult or very easy. So the thing is that in immigration, there is no like one answer that applies to all situations, and there is nothing we can say for sure. Okay, so now this is also because that's why I usually answer the questions like in a very long form, that I just don't say yes or no, because this is basically a question of yes or no. Like, do I still have to pay Social Security if I don't use the trade license? I could say yes or no, but it depends on many factors. So I'll try to touch this topic a bit as well. Generally speaking, if your trade license is the only activity or like only money-making activity, then yes, you should always pay the Social Security, healthcare, income tax, even if you don't have any income at all, because that's your main activity. You don't do anything else, so you should always pay those. If you don't want to pay those because you are not making any money, which kind of makes sense, then you can pause the trade license or you can cancel the trade license completely. The difference is that if you pause it, you can reactivate it anytime. So you can pause it, for example, for 3 months, because you know that for 3 months you will be gone, so you don't need a trade license. You can pause it for 10 years or indefinite period. So whatever you need. And then when you want to reactivate it, then you just go to the trade license office, ask them to reactivate it. It's done in a day or 2, and then you can start running the business again. If you cancel the trade license completely, then if you want to ever get it again, you need to get all the documents again. So all the proof of business address, the criminal check from the country of origin, all these. So closing it makes only sense if you are pretty sure you will never use it again. So that's the simple answer. Then it gets a bit more complicated depending on the purpose of your stay. Because, for example, if the purpose of your stay is business, which I guess is not the case for most of you, from what I understand from the questions, so most of you are employed or students, but if your purpose of stay was business, then if you pause the trade license or if you cancel the trade license, you're basically not fulfilling the purpose of your stay, because you have a business visa, but you're not running a business. So that could potentially lead to your visa being canceled or not being renewed. Similar situation if you have the trade license because you want to, or if you will be using the income through the trade license to prove your income for your residence permit application or your extension application, whatever. So then you should also think about like if it makes sense to close it or not. For those of you who have the permanent residence permit, if you have the trade license, you also get the public health insurance. So if you close the trade license, you also lose the public health insurance. So there are many factors which come in play if you're thinking about like canceling or pausing the trade license. And it also is different if your trade license is just like a side activity. If you have a job, full-time employment, and you have a trade license, then you don't really need to pay the monthly fees anyway. You only do it if your income through the trade license is like high enough for you to start paying those monthly fees, but you find it out after the first taxes. Similar situation, if you're a student, then usually the first year you don't have to pay the monthly fees, but after that first year and after you do your first taxes, then you usually have to start paying those anyway. And then if you're paying those, even if you're not making any money, you need to keep paying it. So that's the answer for that. I hope it all makes sense. It's kind of weird just to have this kind of lecture, so not to interact with you. So I'm kind of looking forward to the open discussion. But before we get there, we still have like a lot of questions to cover. So now, other questions. Okay, there are 3 of those. So let's go through that. First, is a virtual proof of accommodation accepted? That's kind of a difficult question. So maybe for those of you who are not aware of what it actually is. So the virtual proof of accommodation basically means that just for the admins, that was the first question, I believe. So if let's say you're still in your home country and you're applying for a visa or residence permits or a student visa or an employee card or whatever you're applying for, one of the requirements is to have accommodation arranged in the Czech Republic, usually for at least a year. Depends on the type of visa or residence permit you're applying for, but usually it's for 1 year at least. But it's kind of difficult for you if you're somewhere in Africa, in the home country, you cannot even come to the Czech Republic, you don't have a short-term visa, or you cannot get it, or you don't want to get it, and you should find accommodation in the Czech Republic. That might be pretty difficult, maybe even close to impossible. And even if you did that, you would basically have to pay for a flat where you're not living. And since you don't really have you don't know if the visa will be approved and when, you could be paying for a flat for a year and like maybe never even move here. But that's one of the requirements of the Ministry of the Interior, that you need to have an accommodation in the Czech Republic secured when you're applying for any type of long-term visa or long-term residence permit. So many people get into this position that they want to apply for the visa, they have most of the documents ready, but they don't have the accommodation. So then there are some services which provide this thing called virtual proof of accommodation, which basically means that a landlord and owner of an apartment will sign the proof of accommodation form. Basically, they will give you permission to live in their apartment for a specific period of time. You pay for that, but you will never be living in that apartment. It's just, you will basically get the document you need for the visa application, but you know that you will not be living in the apartment. Technically, this is considered by the Ministry of the Interior a fraud. So because you are using a document which you know is not real, because you say, I will be living here, but you know that you will not be living there. So generally speaking, I would not recommend using that. On the other hand, again, I mentioned that I will be honest with you, as I'm trying to be in all my videos and with all our clients. So in some cases, you just don't have any other option. So people buy it. There are companies that provide this kind of service. And honestly speaking, it works in, say, 90% of cases. But the thing there is that it depends on how well the company maintains that. Because if you use a proof of accommodation, which is virtual, and there are just like 10 people registered in the same apartment, the ministry will not care. They will not find out it's a virtual proof of accommodation. So they will not have a problem with that. But if the landlord sells it to tens of people, and in the same apartment, there are like 100 people registered, it will raise red flags at the ministry. And that can be also a reason to deny your visa or your residence permit, because the ministry sees, okay, this is not a real accommodation. You will not be living here. You're forging the documents. So we will deny the application based on that. The problem with that is that there is no way to check how many people are registered in the apartment. So you kind of need to trust the provider. But you never know, because even us, we cannot check it. We can check everything, like we can check the ownership of the apartment and like if the apartment is an actual apartment, all that. But we cannot really check how many people are already on paper accommodated there, because that's only the internal database of the Ministry of the Interior, which we cannot access publicly. So you always bit gamble if you're buying a virtual proof of accommodation. Usually, at least for students, okay, so I'll try to give you some tips. Again, want this to be useful. So if you're in a situation that you are thinking about the virtual proof of accommodation, or you need to get accommodation for your application, there are a couple things we advise to our clients if they cannot get the accommodation. So first, if you're a student, or if you're applying for a student visa or student residence permit, just go with the dormitory the school offers. Most of the schools, especially the public schools in the Czech Republic, they offer some kind of dormitory. And sometimes people say, yeah, but I don't want to live in a dormitory. I want an apartment, all that. But well, if you are looking for a normal apartment, then you will probably never get the visa. So it's easier to just go for the dormitory, get the visa approved. And then when you come here, you can actually start looking for another place to live, and you can change the address at the Ministry of the Interior, and that's completely fine. But getting a real lease agreement, if you're not here, might be pretty difficult. Using the virtual proof of accommodation might be it might be risky. So if you can go for the school accommodation, do it. If you are coming here for work, it's definitely worth asking the company if they provide some kind of accommodation, because sometimes companies have accommodation they can provide. Maybe it's just not in their mind to offer it to you directly or something, but they might have a flat they use for these kind of purposes, or the company owns a flat. Or sometimes what happens is that maybe one of the HRs owns an apartment and they are willing to sign the document for you. So that's kind of a solution in between. If you already have some contacts in the Czech Republic, then you can ask a friend of yours or a family member or someone who owns a property in the Czech Republic to sign this document for you and use that for your application. Okay? It will still be kind of virtual, because you know that you will probably not be living there, but it's definitely safer because you know that there will be not like 100 people registered in your friend's apartment, probably not even in your HR's apartment. They probably don't do it for the whole company. So it's the safer variation of the virtual proof. But again, as I mentioned, all the topics here are a bit complex. So this primarily applies if you're applying for your first visa through the embassy. If you are already here, I would definitely not recommend using a virtual proof of accommodation, because for the first application, it might be kind of understandable, and it might be worth the risk, because if you don't get the virtual proof of accommodation, you don't get any accommodation at all, you will never get the visa and you will never get here. So it might be justifiable, but if you're already here, you've lived somewhere until now, and you use, for whatever reason, you use the virtual proof of accommodation, and then your visa is denied because of that, or your extension or change of purpose or whatever, then you need to leave, and it might actually even be in your record and you might never get a new visa again. So if you're already in the Czech Republic, that's something I would not really recommend unless super desperate. It's your last day and you just cannot do anything else. And okay, maybe. But generally speaking, I would officially, legally, I should not recommend it at all. So I'm not recommending it at all. But the risk, if you're doing it and you're still in your home country, there is a risk, but you don't risk that much because you still don't have the visa anyway. So it's worth the shot. But if you're already here, it's probably not worth losing what you already have. So that was virtual proof of accommodation. And we're how much? Yeah, already half an hour in, and it's been like 7 questions. So we'll see. Maybe tomorrow morning we're done. Okay. So is it possible to have a civil wedding for 2 foreigners? One person has an employee card while the other has a visit visa. It's technically possible. You can get married here as long as both of you are legally in the Czech Republic, because one of the documents needed for the wedding is a confirmation from the foreign police, not from the Ministry of the Interior, but from the foreign police, saying that you are legally staying in the Czech Republic and that you can get married here. So you definitely have to be legal here, and you can get married. The question is if it's really realistic to do that, because getting married in the Czech Republic might be a bit difficult because you need a lot of documents. And those documents also kind of depend on where you get married, because, for example, different parts of Prague, the municipalities are usually the ones responsible for the marriage. And they might have different kind of documents they are looking for. So if you go to Prague 2 and you ask about, okay, what you will need from us to get married here, they tell you. But if you then get married in Prague 3, they might require a bit different documents. Plus, there are some timelines because you usually need to book the place in advance. So you cannot just go to like Prague 3 and then take the number and get married. You need to plan it in advance. They usually also want you to bring all the documents in advance so they can check it before they even offer you an appointment or date for the wedding. And for some places, for the most interesting places where you can get married, it might be booked for months in advance. So it would be a lot of planning. So I guess if you want to do it, I would hire some experienced wedding planner who's done this before many times and who can give you a good advice to do it. Because if you try to do it on your own, it might be very difficult to plan everything the way that it works out. We've done a couple marriages, but I would definitely not risk it in the situation that one comes here just under a short-term visa, because then the time is very limited and might be very stressful for everyone. We've done marriages, but mainly where the 2 people were already living here on some like residence permits, and we had enough time to sort out everything that was needed. But it's definitely possible. Now, okay. The last one from the other category would be, what is the number of days required to report to the OMP, the Ministry of the Interior office, before the expiration date of one's residence permit. So if what this means is when can you apply for the extension or for the change of purpose of your stay? It kind of depends on the type of visa or residence permit you have, but generally it's either 90 days or 120 days in advance. So if your visa ends today, you could have applied 4 months ago for the extension. And the last day when you can do it is the last day of the validity of the visa. So if today is the last day of the validity of your current visa or residence permit, if you go to the ministry today and you submit your extension application, you will be fine. Of course, it must be an opening day of the ministry, so it cannot be like a weekend or something. And I would probably not risk doing it the very last day, because if something happens at the ministry, if their systems don't work, or if they close for like a water leakage or whatever, then you would be in a big trouble. So you can do it on the last day, definitely not recommended. You can do it up to 120 days in advance, definitely recommended. Good. Now there were 2 questions which are kind of tax related, and I'm primarily an immigration and relocation advisor. So I know a lot about visas, about health insurance, about trade license, all these kind of things, but not that much about tax related issues. I know generally what we need for our work. So I know the tax laws related to trade license, but I don't know that much about international taxes or like governmental support, all that. That's usually something or questions for accountant or for a tax advisor. So I will try to give you at least point you in some direction in these 2 next questions, but it might be best to maybe have another session with an accountant or a tax advisor, or maybe I can find out and let you know individually, because I guess these questions were written by one person, so might not be too much of work, but at least to give you an idea. So if one holds an employee residence permit, in case of loss of job, is the person entitled to social benefits, or this benefit is only for permanent residence holders? There are 2 things that go together in this question, because one might be what kind of residence permit you have, because with the permanent residence permit, you get a lot of advantages and a lot of benefits, let's say. But the other thing is that there are also rules not related to your residence status, but also to the work itself. So I believe that you can only get the governmental support, like the unemployment support, if in the last 2 years you've been employed for at least 12 months, I believe. But just to give you an idea, there are some rules like that as well. So it's not like if you work for 2 months and then you get unemployed, that you can automatically, even as a Czech person, that you automatically get unemployment support. What you can potentially at least get is that you get registered with the labor office as unemployed, and at least the government will be paying for your social security and healthcare. So you can at least keep that if you register, or you will be paying for that yourself, but you can do it. If you're just unemployed and not registered anywhere, you would need to buy the private health insurance. So this might be at least something that could potentially help. But for the governmental support, like what are the exact conditions, especially from the residence permit standpoint, it would be best to ask an accountant. The other questions related to that, can foreigners on employee cards and other long-term visa qualify for pension in the Czech Republic? So it would be a similar answer, because to qualify for the pension, there are also some criteria, even for Czech citizens, not related to your residence status. I believe that you can only get like a full pension after 20 years of working, of being employed or self-employed. You might be able to get some portion of the pension sooner, But again, that would be more of a question for a tax advisor or an accountant. But there are other rules than just your residence status. That's the whole point I was trying to make. And I think that wraps up the first 10 questions. So let's go to the rest. Let me just have a drink. A coffee.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah, was there any question or any suggestion, or should I just go through the questions?
Yeah, I think you can move to the next set of questions, and then after that, we will move straight to the question and answers. Yeah.
Okay, I see that there are some questions already popping up in the chat, so that's good. And 72 people watching, that's also very good. So thank you guys all for being here and for not leaving. That's even more important. So thank you, and let's go to the next questions. So the first set of questions will be about PR, which is probably what most of you are interested. So let's do it. I'll just read all the questions that are here in this section, and we'll go through that. So if someone is someone with Czech PR able to attend university for free in other Schengen states? That's a bit complex question. First thing is that we usually move people to the Czech Republic. So moving to other countries, we know a bit about that, but the thing is that the exact procedure can vary from country to country, because even though there are some general EU rules, then still every country can modify them a bit within the EU law. So especially for studying for free, I don't think that it applies close to all countries in the EU. In some countries, it's like that. I believe Nordic countries like Finland and other countries in that region might allow you to study for free if you speak the local language as well. But it doesn't have to be like that in all the countries. So first thing is, if you can even study for free in that country. So that would be definitely first thing I would be investigating, saying, hey, so say either if you want to move to a country, then ask in that country to see if you can study for free and what are the conditions for that. And if you just know you want to study for free, and it doesn't matter in which country, then I would start then with investigating that in which country you can study for free, and then asking what are the conditions there. That's the studying part. Then another part is the immigration, because even if you have a Czech PR, you can technically live in some other EU countries as well, but usually it means anyway getting some local residence permit. One thing which I maybe mention here, because I don't think it's any part of the questions, but it's important to know that if you have a Czech permanent residence permit, you can live up to 6 years in some other EU country. So if you have a Czech PR, you can move to Germany and live there for 4 years and then come back, and you still have the Czech PR and it's not canceled. But you still might need to get a residence permit in the country where you're going to go. If you want to live in some country outside of the EU, then you can do it for 1 year. Again, there might be some exceptions depending on what kind of PR you get, based on what purpose, but generally it works like this. You can spend up to 1 year outside of the EU and still keep the Czech PR, and you can spend up to 6 years in other EU countries and still keep the PR. So that's also related to like moving to the other country and study there, because if you wanted to study in that country, you would probably still need to get some kind of residence permit. So those are two things that go together there. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing the questions. If a partner or person with Czech PR applies for a family union visa, how many years is given? So this kind of depends on what exactly you apply for. As I mentioned in the beginning of this session, there are two types of family reunification. So one is the family reunification visa, and one is the family reunification residence permit. So the validity of that visa or residence permit is not really given by the PR holder, but by the rules of the visa or residence permit you're applying for. So if you have a PR and you want to bring your spouse here and they apply for a visa, family reunification visa, the maximum validity of that visa is 1 year because that's the general maximum validity of a visa. If they come here under the long-term residence permit, then generally speaking, the maximum they can get is 2 years. If the child applies for the permanent residency through the embassy, as I explained with the Indian client example, then they usually get it for 5 years. If you have obtained Czech PR, how long do you have to wait to be able to apply for citizenship? Is it 10 years in total from the time of your first visa? Yes, if you want to, we will have some questions about citizenship later on, but the question is already here. So generally, you can apply for Czech PR after Czech citizenship after being here for 10 years and having a permanent residence permit, or after 5 years of having a permanent residence permit. So if you say you are here for 5 years, then you get the permanent residence permit. Then after 5 years, you can apply for the citizenship. But you could potentially do it the way that you've been here for 10 years as a student. So all the 10 years only count as half. So you can only apply for the PR after 10 years. And then when you get the PR, you can basically immediately apply for Czech citizenship because it's 10 years in total, but you always must have the PR. You cannot apply for Czech citizenship if you've been living here for 20 years, but you don't have a PR. PR is always the requirement. So this hopefully answers the questions. There might be different scenarios as well, because if your spouse is, for example, a Czech citizen, you can get the PR after 2 years. So then it would be 5 years of PR plus the 2 years you live here. So 7 years in total. Sorry, guys. It's oxygenated water, not a beer. Yeah, so it depends, but generally it's either 5 years of the PR or 10 years in total, but you always must have the PR. Is someone with Czech PR able to work in other Schengen states? If so, what is the process? That's similar to what I was talking about in relation to the students wanting to study somewhere for free. The thing is that there is some general EU law which says that you have the permanent residence permit and you have a status of a long-term resident of the EU. That's just a status which is usually just written in your PR card that you have this status of a long-term resident of the EU. Technically speaking, you could live in other countries or you could work in other countries freely, in other EU countries, not just Schengen countries, but EU countries. But usually you anyway need to get some local residence permit. For example, again, if I take it from the other perspective, because we're primarily focused on the Czech Republic and move to Prague. If someone has a PR in some other EU country and they want to move to the Czech Republic, they can do it, but they have to apply for a residence permit as a long-term resident of the EU. So they can get a 2 years residence permit based on the fact that they have a PR in some other country. So it's a relatively simple process. They can apply for that inside of the Czech Republic, so they don't have to go through any embassy or anything like that. The process is pretty, not exactly simple. Nothing is really simple with the Czech immigration, but relatively straightforward. But they need to get a local residence permit here, especially if they want to work here, if they want to get a trade license, all that, because One thing is what the EU law says, but the other thing is also what companies know and what people know, and even what the foreign police knows and what the immigration knows, because that's something, usually there is something that is decided on the EU level, and then each country has to implement it somehow in their laws. And then there is also like the practical side of things, and these can be like very far apart. So even if you technically have the right, try to explain it to someone to hire you. Okay, hey, yeah, you can hire me. Like it's the EU law. I have a permanent residence in Germany. I can work in the Czech Republic. The HR will most likely tell you, yeah, good for you, but we will not do that. So it also depends on the country where you want to go and what is their law, and also about what you exactly want to do there and what is the requirement of that party. For example, if you want to study, you should also ask the school if they require you to have some kind of residence permit. If you want to work there, you should ask the employer how to do that. Next one. If my partner is on a reunification visa and I get PR, does he get PR too? So that was answered before. Not automatically, they can get it if they qualify for the PR as well, but that's not automatic. How long will it take third country children born here to get PR and citizenship? That's also a bit complex topic because it primarily depends on the parents. Let's say if you already have as a parent, say the mother, you have a PR already. Or, okay, in general works this way. If a child is born in the Czech Republic to a third country national, then the child must apply for the same type of residence permit which the parent has within 60 days. So your child is born today, within 60 days, they have to apply for the same type of visa or residence permit you have. So if you have an employee card, they have to apply for a long-term residence permit. If you have just a visa, the long-term visa in your passport, they have to apply for a long-term visa. If you have a PR, then the child has to apply for the PR, so they can get the PR immediately. If they don't, or if you don't have the PR and you will be getting it later, then the rules are a bit different. That's for the PR. As for citizenship, that depends. Generally, you can add okay, so if you already have the citizenship, if you're a Czech citizen, then the child automatically gets the citizenship as well. Of course, you need to get the birth certificate, you need to get the passport, all that. But if you are already, or if one of the parents is a Czech citizen, then the child can get Czech citizenship as well. If you are not, then the child can apply along with you when you are applying for the citizenship. So let's say you're expecting a child and you also want to apply for Czech citizenship. Then if you first give birth and then apply for the citizenship, you can already include the child into your own application. So hopefully that explains. If my child gets PR, does it impact us, the parents who are still on long-term visas? I'm trying to see if there is even like an option for that to happen. If the child could get a PR sooner than the parents. Potentially, I guess yes. Definitely not on long-term visas, but if you had long-term residence permits, might happen potentially, but I don't think I've seen a case like that in the whole 12 years we've been doing this. So potentially it could go the way that you've been all living here for 5 years and you just don't want to pass the language exam, so you don't apply for the PR, but the child doesn't have to pass the exam because they're below 15, so they apply for the permanent residence permit. So that could potentially happen, but I don't think it changes anything really for you as the parent. But it's not something I can really see happen in real life. What is the process for attaining citizenship or PR in Czech? So I believe that's been explained by answering the previous questions, and we'll get to the citizenship, or was it? Well, yeah, maybe I'll just like touch it briefly. Generally speaking, you can apply for a permanent residence permit after 5 years of living here. Student years, the proper students like accredited courses only count as half. So if you've been here as a student for 6 years, that only counts as 3 towards the permanent residency. So you would need to stay here another 2 years after the 6 years of studies to apply for the permanent residency. But the actual application works the same way as all the other applications. So you collect the documents you need, you get them to the Ministry of the Interior. They are processing the application. Once approved, you go back to the ministry, you give your fingerprints, they take a photo of you, do the signature, all that, and then later on you get a permanent residence card. So technically it's a similar process as applying for a residence permit, extending your residence permit, whatever. One thing which is important to mention here is that you always must have a valid residence permit when you're applying for a PR, and also the whole time until you get it approved. So let's say you've been here for 6 years, so you already qualify for the PR because you've been here as an employee the whole time. And now you're extending your employee card because it's always 2 years at a time. So 6 years, you're extending the employee card. You cannot just apply for the PR and don't apply for extension of the employee card, because if the PR application was denied, then you would be left with nothing. Second, it's not legally possible either, but it would be very risky for you anyway to do that. The other thing is that if you've already applied for extension of the employee card and you are on the bridging visa, you're waiting for the denial, hopefully for the approval. So in that period, when you're on the bridging visa, you cannot even legally apply for the PR. You need to always have a valid residence permit. So if you're applying for a PR, or if you're planning on doing it, then always do it when you still have enough time on your current residence permit. Or if you do it later, then always make sure you extend your current residence permit as well to avoid any potential trouble. And the last, or there might be one more in the next section, but last here is the Czech language mandatory for PR applications. So yeah, I already answered that in the beginning. So yes, generally yes, but if you're below 15 or over 60, you don't have to pass the language exam. Potentially you can use other language exams as well, but those are usually very specific type of exams. So most people don't really qualify for that. So generally, yes, you need to pass the A2 level. Then there is one in this section of the visa questions. Let's say there is one about the PR as well, which is what are the requirements for permanent residency? So let me try to share my screen. So I believe admins or administrators, you will need to stop sharing. Yeah, thank you very much. And I will share my screen and I'll take you through the list of documents here. Everyone sees that? The permanent residence permit non-EU list of documents?
Visible.
Perfect, perfect, thank you. So these are the documents you need to have when you go apply for the permanent residence permit. First, application form. That's the same green form which you fill in for your standard residence permit and extensions. If you have an employee card, that's also green, but that's not the one. It's a green form for a PR application. Nothing too complicated in there. You've been through that application form many times before, so that's usually simple. Passport, yeah, obviously you need to have a valid passport, plus what I mentioned before, you also need to have a valid residence permit. One passport size photo, yeah, that's easy. You've done it a million times before that as well. Now, proof of income, that's usually, or that can be the tricky part. because then it depends on what is the purpose of your stay. If you are employed, then it's generally relatively simple. So as you can see here in the employee section, you basically just need to have an employment contract, valid employment contract, and you need to get a confirmation of your salary for the last 3 months, the last quarter. It can be either your salary slips, or it can usually be used the kind of a statement from the HR saying what is your position, how long have you been working there, that you're not in a probation period or leave-in notice, and what is your average salary. So that if you're an employee, that's a relatively simple task to deal with. I can see a raised hand. I don't know if we should answer it right now, or if we'll leave it for the open session, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. So sorry, I will not answer the question now, but if you stay until the end, I'll be happy to get back to this. If you are self-employed, then proving your income is a bit more complicated. Then it also depends on like how are you self-employed, or what is the purpose of your stay. If you've been staying here under the business visa the whole time, the 5 years or 6 years or whatever, then you probably know how to prove your income. You're familiar with that, because the proving the income is the same as for the business residence permit extensions. But if you, for some reason, just like got the trade license because you've been here for 5 years, so you switch to the business residence permit, and it's your first time using your freelancing income to prove your income, that might be a bit complicated. The thing is that if you're self-employed, the ministry primarily looks at your taxes as the source of your income and the source of the calculation of your income. So you need to make sure that your income tax return and the social security report, the healthcare report, they show high enough numbers. I will not go too much deep into like how much is enough, because it depends on your situation, your rent, the amount you pay for your apartment, and how many people are in the family, all that. But there is always some minimum amount of money you need to be making. And the easiest way to prove it is to do your taxes right and make sure that all the numbers there are high enough. Then you basically just need to get a confirmation from the tax office how much taxes you paid, and confirmation from Social Security and healthcare offices how much you paid for those in the last year, and then the ministry is able to calculate your net income and hopefully approve the application. If you have not done your taxes yet, meaning that you just got the trade license now and you want to apply for the permanent residency now as well, it's possible, but it will be way more complicated for you to prove your income, because the ministry, you have not done your taxes yet, so the ministry cannot look at those numbers in the tax return, and they want you to prove how much you're actually making. So you would need to create something called a table of income, where you list all your incomes, your expenses, the social security, healthcare, all that. So the ministry clearly sees the numbers. But you also need to support it with relevant documents showing that you really are making that money. So you would need to have invoices for all the payments, and all the payments should go to your bank account. So if you receive cash, it's very difficult to prove that you're actually making any money, because there is no record of that. So I'll not go into deeper into that. If this is your situation, ideally get in touch and we'll be happy to discuss it. We can arrange a consultation or something like that. But it's a bit more complicated if you have not done your taxes yet and you need to prove your income. Then proof of accommodation. If you are applying for a permanent residency, you've been through that a million times before as well. So you need to have either the proof of accommodation form or the lease agreement. Czech language exam, we talked about it a lot today already, so that's clear, hopefully. Power of attorney, that's primarily if you work with us as a client, we always have a power of attorney in that case, so we can speak with the ministry on your behalf. Sorry, guys. I've been talking the whole day. I've had appointments the whole day, and now I've been talking for an hour. So my voice is getting tired. So power of attorney, that's primary for us, so we can represent you in front of the ministry. We can send them additional documents if they need any, or we can act on your behalf there. If you apply yourself, you don't need the power of attorney. Administrative fee for the biometric card, that's the same 2,500 crowns in stamps as you're used to. One thing about the stamps, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but the ministry will stop using stamps at some point because they stopped being printed. So there is just a limited amount of stamps, but there is still a big stock. So it will probably take until the end of this year, maybe even longer. But when the stamps are no longer available, the ministry will start accepting like cards and cash payments. So that will be finally the step into the 21st century, that the Ministry of the Interior will not want you to bring stamps to pay for the applications. We'll see where it happens exactly, but it will happen. Background check, that's something the ministry could potentially request, but I don't think I've seen it in 12 years either. Yeah, now important notes, that's the same kind of as for any other application. All the documents or none of the documents can be older than 180 days. So if you have an employee contract, that's why you're getting the fresh salary statements or something fresh to prove that you're still employed there. If you're using the lease agreement as the proof of your accommodation, also the lease agreement should be not older than 6 months. If it's older than that, you should get a confirmation from the landlord that it's still valid, or ideally you get the proof of accommodation form, which is signed at the post office, and that's done. Yeah, that's it, I think, for this part. And let's go back to the visa question. So can I unshare this somehow? Probably not.
Yeah, I will take over the screen. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. So
okay, so I believe you can see my screen again. Now we can move on to the visa questions. And I think we can skip the questions that you've already touched on, some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's do that. Can a visitor to Prague start a job search to get a long-term visa for a stay? Yes, of course, if you come here as a tourist or you come here to visit a family member or someone, you can start looking for a job, but you cannot really change, or you cannot switch from a short-term visa to an employee card or a blue card or something in the territory of the Czech Republic. So you can look for a job, you can get a local, like an employment offer or something, but in 99% of cases, you will anyway need to go back to the country of origin and apply the standard way for an employee card or a blue card or something like that. Two things I want to mention here, just real quick, because I see this a lot in our daily practice, that there are plenty of scammers who will offer you like, okay, I will get you a job in the Czech Republic. You just pay like 3,000 euros and I will make sure you get all the documents. That might be true. I'm not saying that the scam is in the fact that they will not get you a job. They might get you a job, but for most African countries and for most Asian countries, there are quotas for how many people can apply yearly for an employee card. And the quotas are sometimes very low, like as low as 30 people a year. Or in some countries, it's even 0. So no one can apply for an employee card if your employer is not in some special governmental program. So even though all the documents you get might be real and might be a real employment contract, they usually provide also accommodation proof, all that. So those documents might be real, but they might, you might never be able to use them because there are no available slots for you to apply for an employee card. So just be aware of that, be cautious. If probably most of you are here already, so that's not like exactly your case, but maybe someone you know, your friends, family members who are still in the country of origin. And similar thing with the seasonal visa, because often the scammers say that you can get a seasonal visa and come here and change it to something else, which is not true. It's definitely not true for the short-term visas. If you come here for 3 months, let's say, you cannot switch it in any case. But if you come here under the long-term visa, the only option you can switch to is a blue card. But if you come here for a seasonal job, which is usually like picking fruits or stuff like that, it's not very realistic. You will get a job which will qualify for a blue card within that period of time. So be careful with that as well. The seasonal visa is even more like there is a lot of scammers regarding that as well. Just wanted to mention that. What other options can you explore if you cannot get the required credits for your course, and as a result, your study contract will be terminated? But there is something was probably there as well, but it's not there anymore. But anyway,
I think there is a missing piece.
You found it, or
no?
No, it doesn't matter. That's okay.
Okay.
One thing, very important thing I want to mention as well. If you want to make any changes, you're already here, you're a student, and now you want to switch to an employee card. Or if this kind of situation happens, that you know that you will not pass all the exams, or you know that you don't want to study anymore, I always recommend you to get in touch. Of course, ideally with us, and arrange a consultation where we can discuss it. But even if you use any other service, or if you use like even the free centers that are offered by the government, I would always recommend you to consult with someone who knows the rules before you make any changes, because this question is what happens a lot, and how people get into trouble a lot, and a serious trouble. Because specifically with the student visa, it works the way, or student residence permit, it works the way that if you are no longer a student, meaning that you quit the university, or you don't attend classes, or you don't pass all your exams, all that, if you stop being a student, then the school has to report it to the Ministry of the Interior. Your employer, for example, doesn't need to report it anywhere. If they fire you or if you leave, they need to report it to the labor office, but not to the immigration. But the school has to report it to the Ministry of the Interior. So the Ministry of the Interior will know that you're no longer a student. And if you're no longer a student, then you're not fulfilling the purpose of your stay, and your visa or residence permit will be canceled at some point. So if you leave, if now you know you've passed, you didn't pass your exams, and you know you will be terminated, it's almost kind of late to start thinking about the option. So it would be better if you know, okay, hey, this school is not for me, I will probably not pass the exams. So then you should consult with someone, and you know what are the next steps. Because of course there is almost always a solution. You can switch to an employee card, or you can potentially switch schools as well. Or you can, if you have a Czech or EU partner and you live together, you can switch to the partnership visa. Or if you have, if there are other, there might be other solutions as well, but you might not have enough time to switch if you start late. So that's the message I wanted to spread, that if you know that something like that might happen, or if you want to make some important change in your life from the immigration perspective, then definitely consult with someone. There is almost always a solution, but you need to have enough time for it. What are the requirements for the permanent residency? We've been through that. Pension, benefits, we've been through that. What is the best course of action for a graduate in the Czech Republic who has not yet secured a permanent job and is running out of time to renew their visa? Okay, again, you should have thought about that before, but because if you're already running out of time, that's kind of late. But the thing is that there is kind of a simple solution. If you finished an accredited program of a Czech university, okay, so if you're the proper student, so you studied a public university, the course was accredited, then you can switch, or you can apply for a job seeker residence permit. And that gives you additional 9 months to stay in the Czech Republic and figure out what you want to do next. And it can be either applying for a job and then applying for an employee card, or you can start your own business. You can get a trade license and you can apply for a business residence permit. So if you graduated from an accredited course, then the easiest solution, we recommend it anyway to everyone. Even if you have a job offer already, then we still recommend going through the job seeker residence permit, because even if you have a job offer, it does not mean that the employer will not like fire you within the probation period, or that you will not like the job. And if you don't apply for the job seeker residence permit and then something like that happens, then your employee card application will be denied and you lose everything you've built during those years living here. So it's always anyway a good backup to have the job seeker residence permit. And if you have it, you have 9 months to switch to the employee card or to a business residence permit. So you always have some option B, you have some certainty, some security. And that's what we usually prefer when we work with clients, to have some backup, some plan B you can go to if the plan A doesn't work well. But do you have a contract with one restaurant that support visas? Is it advisable to use that, or are there other good options? So that might be the missing part to the previous question. If your contract will be terminated, but you have a contract with the restaurant that supports visas. Well, yeah, then it would be definitely a good option, that if that was the question, the rest of the question. So yes, if you know you will be terminated, your studies will be terminated, and you already are working, because as a student you can work, you have free access to the labor market, then you can switch to an employee card. And that's probably the best thing you can do, as long as you know that the employer is solid and they will support you in the process. You could potentially switch to other purposes of stay, but that's individual. But yes, if you have a job offer, you can potentially do that. And if it's approved, you'll be safe. If I'm on an employee card and my partner is on a reunification visa, can we switch? How? Yes, we've done this before. If one of you, we've done this switch, that one of you had a job or the employee card, the other was under the family reunification, and then this person got the employee card and this person became family member, just as opposed to dependent. So it's technically possible. Definitely first step would be for the family reunification person getting an employee card or a blue card or some other type of residence permit, because you cannot be both like dependent. You cannot have like family reunification visa and your spouse also have a family reunification visa. There always must be the main applicant. So there must be the employee card holder and then family reunification, or a blue card holder or a student, and then the family reunification. So first step would definitely be switching the family reunification person to something else, to the employee card, blue card, student, residence permit, whatever, and then changing the purpose of stay of the other person to family reunification. It's kind of, there are some rules for that as well, because it depends on how the family member came here. If you came here under the long-term visa, then it's fine. But if you came here under a long-term residence permit directly, then you might need to wait, say 3 years or some amount of time before you can switch to something else, because the long-term residence permit also allows you to work. So there is no kind of reason for you to switch to an employee card or blue card. So there are some other rules as well. And it would always be best to consult the situation in details. But technically it's possible, but the family member must first change their own status, and then the other person can switch theirs. Okay, next. If you have obtained Czech PR, how long do you have to wait to be able to apply for citizenship? Okay, so we answered that before as well. What are the requirements for bringing my partner from Nigeria to the Czech Republic? I'm currently on a student visa and will graduate next year. Okay, so the requirements, so I will share the list of documents in a second. So we'll go through the list of documents so you get the actual documents you need as well. But generally, as I explained before, you can either, or your family member can apply for the long-term visa anytime, or for the long-term residence permit if you have been here for at least 15 months as a student. So it depends on what you're studying. If you're studying bachelor's, so you're graduating next year, you probably meet the requirements already. If you're studying master's, then the spouse might not qualify for the residence permit yet. But as a student, you can bring your family members. We get this question a lot. We even wrote a blog about that. So maybe that's a good source of information as well. Of course, the official website of the ministry, and now actually the website, the FRS website, is pretty good. The previous one was pretty bad, and you could not really find the information. It was written in the way that you probably would not even understand if you didn't know what they were talking about. But now the new FRS website is actually well done, I would say. It's not really good for us as an immigration agency who are paid to help with visas, but good for you definitely, because the information is actually well organized there, in my opinion. But if you want the real life approach, because everything there is written by the law, so how it should be. But it's not always like that, as I've explained, that you probably know from your experience as well. So we also have our website, movetoprague.com, where you can go to the blog section, and we've written tens of articles, maybe hundreds of articles about different topics. Probably some of you also know me from YouTube, so you can also go to my channel and see the videos there, where you can get the real life information, not just the official information, but how it really works in real life. So I don't know why I mentioned that, why I got there. Probably, yeah, okay, that's the very common question, was that I'm a student, can I bring my spouse, can I bring my child? So yes, whatever type of residence permit or visa you have, you can always bring your family. It just depends under which type you can bring them, if the visa or the residence permit.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe thanks a lot, Jan. But maybe we'll take because you've almost touched all the on the questions one way or the other. So we can pick the online questions now, and also those I can see hands are already coming up. So perhaps instead of, we will allow people to speak, and then we will take the questions verbally, and then we will read the questions that has also come in online. So I can see Doris, your hand is up. So please unmute and then ask your question.
Thank you. And thank you, Jan, for all the presentation and the answers. Everything has been very well dealt with. My question is that you made mention of children who are below 15 years who can apply for PR. So I will use myself as an example. For me, I have a child who is 1 year. I'm still on long-term residence permit. So after I'm almost 5 years, I would say. So after I am 5 years here, although I will be on long-term residence permit, can my child apply for PR, because I am officially 5 years, although I don't have the PR myself? And if yes, will that be conferred to me later on, or do I also have to potentially apply for the PR later? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Generally speaking, or in your case as well, the child can only apply for a PR either if they meet the requirements themselves, or if you already have the PR. So it's not about you meeting the 5 years requirement, but you haven't the PR. So if you don't have the PR yet, and the child is like you said, a year old or like very young, so they don't meet the requirements yet, so unfortunately they cannot go for the PR directly.
Thank you. I can see Kofi, your hand is up. So please unmute and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Jan, for everything. So currently, I am a student about to graduate, and I'm also working. So it will be easier for me to switch to the blue card. But currently, I also got a job offer from a company in Lithuania. The head office and everything is in Lithuania. And they are saying that they could send me a contract so that I could use it here and still pay my taxes and everything whilst I'm still here. And if I can use that contract to also apply for the blue card, which is the work permit. I just want to ask if it's possible.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so I'm trying to like see how to approach this. Generally speaking, if you want to apply for an employee card or for a blue card in the Czech Republic, then it would need to be a Czech employer. The question is if the company potentially, there are like services like employer of record, which basically means that you work for a foreign company, but you're technically employed in the Czech Republic. So potentially it could work, but generally speaking, that would be very difficult, and it would be very like, you would need to be very much sure what exactly is happening there, because generally speaking, you can only get a blue card or an employee card if you have a local employer. You could potentially move to Lithuania and get a residence permit there if that was something you wanted to do. Potentially, you could also get a local like Czech trade license maybe and like become like a contractor with them. But employment in another country and getting a residence permit in the Czech Republic based on that, it is very unlikely to happen. Potentially, maybe possible, but it would be definitely very complicated to prove to the ministry and get it done.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we can now switch, since no hand is up, we can switch to the online questions. And the first question is, if one completes an Erasmus Plus study program, that's master's and PhD for 1 year, can he or her apply for long-term permit for the purpose of employment?
If one completes an Erasmus Plus study program, master's and PhD for 1 year, can her or she apply for long-term permit for a purpose of employment? Student visa applications and student residence permit applications are the most confusing ones for me, honestly, because there are so many different like types and different programs, and so all the different Erasmus and like Albright programs, all that, different exceptions and different types of studies, and there are different laws that like connect to each other, because one thing is the immigration, but then there is also the Education Act, all that. So it's all very confusing, and there are a million different like scenarios. I would probably put it, so it in this case would be best to meet and see exactly what's going on there and maybe find a solution like that. Generally speaking, if you have a local residence permit, so let's say a local student residence permit based on your studies, then you can switch to some other purpose of stay. So in this case, that would be employment. That's possible. But for example, students of like people who are students in some other EU country, and they have like the official student residence permit where it's specifically written it's a student residence permit, then they can come here for up to 1 year with no need for a residence permit. So you can study here under your German student residence permit or French student residence permit without the need of any local residence permit. But if you don't have a local residence permit, you cannot really change the purpose of your stay and apply for anything because you don't have a residence permit. So in that case, potentially what you could do is to apply through an embassy in the country where you're studying, but there are some rules for that as well. And the main thing is that you can only do it after you've been living in that country for at least 2 years. So depends on how you're here. If you have a local student residence permit, then you can switch. If you don't, then might be complicated.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll give one question from the audience. So if your hand is not up and you want to speak, you can unmute and speak. All right. So, okay, we can take the next question online then. Another one says, if you have an employer card, no, I think the person is referring to employee card.
Yep.
If you have an employee card and your company approved for you to work from abroad for 5 months, and you decide to cancel your accommodation for that period, does it affect your resident status?
Not really, because the ministry, unless you tell the ministry, then they could start asking questions, why you cancel the accommodation, all that. But if you, the thing is that when you're applying for the employee card, you need to provide accommodation proof. And that's for some period of time. And also, if you change the accommodation later, the ministry has some record of your accommodation. And they basically, the landlord do not really need to notify them that you terminated the lease agreement. You don't really need to notify them either that you terminated the lease agreement. You just need to report a new address within 30 days from when the change happened. So in this case, most likely the ministry will not even know that you canceled your accommodation, and then you should be fine. Like, you can technically work in some other EU countries under the Czech employee card. So that's nothing illegal to do. So even if the ministry asks any questions about your accommodation, that would be explainable, as long as it's, as the company is fine with that, it's part of your employment contract, and you can legally work in that country, because it's another thing if the receiving country allows you to work there. But from the perspective of the accommodation, I don't really see a problem in that. Then you just need to remember that when you come back and you stay in a different place, then you need to report it to the ministry and change the address with the ministry.
Okay, thanks, Ian, for the answer. Please, you can raise your hand and ask questions as we take the online questions, and I'll call you. Okay, so the next one says, when applying for Czech tourist visa, do you have to submit real flight tickets during the visa application? If someone is in anywhere outside Europe or wherever, and the person wants to apply for a tourist visa, do you have to provide real flight tickets, that you bought a flight ticket before you'll be given the visa?
Well, couple things here. I don't really know what means a real flight ticket, that you like create some fake flight ticket somewhere and then try to use that. Probably that's not the question. Another thing is that we primarily deal with people who are moving to the Czech Republic. So work for long-term, and we deal with long-term visas, long-term residence permits. So I have some experience with short-term visas, but not really comparable to the long-term ones. I would say like 1% of what I know about long-term visas and long-term residence permits, that's what I know about short-term visas. So another thing is that every embassy might have different rules for that. So that's one of the reasons why we don't really help with short-term visas, because for the long-term visas, everything is decided by the Ministry of the Interior here, by some decision makers. We know what to expect, and the rules are kind of same for everyone, even though it depends on the mood of the office, all that, but we can deal with that. And with short-term visas, every embassy, or if it's a VFS or whoever is making the decision about the short-term visa, in different countries, they might have different rules. We've seen it in our daily life as well. If some of our clients were getting short-term visas, for example, to get here and then apply for a partnership visa or some other options, then the process was different at every embassy. So one thing is that it probably depends on the embassy as well. But generally speaking, I believe you need to have a flight arranged. Question is if you need to have already like the booked or the proper ticket like paid for, or if they would be fine with just having the flight booked but not paid. I would ideally ask this question to the embassy where you will be applying, or to the VFS branch where you will be applying, to just double check with them, because honestly, I'm not 100% sure about that. And again, it can vary based on where you apply.
Thank you. Enoch, please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much for this insightful lecture on immigration rules and stuff in Czech Republic. My question is regarding family reunion or partners joining the others who are already in Czech Republic. Does the Czech Republic recognize a fiancé, or if I have a girlfriend back at home and I want her to join me here, what do I need to prove? Is it something they recognize as a family? And if so, what are the required documents to prove that this is a girlfriend or a fiancé that I would want to marry in future? So I want her to come and join me when applying for such person.
Yeah, understood. Good question. Thank you. Well, the family reunification is primarily or basically only meant for married couples. It applies to like same-sex marriages as well, but not really to, I don't know what are the other types, but in some countries you have something which is not really a marriage, but you are like officially together. But that's not meant for the family reunification purpose of stay. So if you want to get someone here under the family reunification, you would need to be married.
Okay.
But you can potentially try to get someone else here as well, like your long-term partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever. But in that case, you would be applying for the other type of visa, other purpose of stay, which there are some significant differences. For example, they might not be, your partner might not be able to work even when they get the residence permit after some time, because that's the other purpose of stay, not the family reunification where you can work. Plus, you would need to really convince the ministry that you've been in a long-term serious relationship. There are not like exact rules for that, but it's comparable to something called a partnership visa, where one of you is an EU citizen, the other is not an EU citizen, and you're not married, you just live together. In that case, that partner of an EU citizen can get a special type of residence permit called a partnership visa, and you don't need to be married for that, but you need to prove that you've been in a serious long-term relationship similar to a marriage. So I believe that this would be something similar to prove in your case. If you are both non-EU citizens, you want your partner to apply for the other purpose of stay, then you would need to prove your relationship. And I'll explain in a second what documents you need for that. We usually use a combination of plenty different documents. So first, I would say that the minimum we usually recommend for being together is about a year, but the longer the better. If you've been together for 3 months, probably makes no sense to even try, because it's not a long-term relationship similar to a marriage. If you've been together for 9 months, might be. If you've been together for 2-3 years, definitely you have higher chances. That also depends on like what the relationship is like. If it's all online because you're here, she's there, and you just like speak to each other on FaceTime every day, that might probably not be too convincing for a ministry. But if you visit each other, or if you lived together before you moved here, or if you you shared your household before, maybe you were together even like physically before, and you visit each other, that's definitely better and with higher chances of approval. And then as for the documents, we usually write, or we ask our clients to write a statement describing their relationship. So we met on this date, and since then we've been doing this and this and this. Our relationship looks like this. We know each other's families, blah, 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 blah. Like a story of your relationship. And then, because this is just a statement, so it's nothing official, then you need to provide some other documents which will kind of prove that what you're writing in the statement is true. So we usually use plenty of photos of you together. So if you in the statement you mention we travel together frequently, we've been to this country, this country, this country, this country, then we attach photos from those countries where you are there, you look as a couple, you hug each other, you kiss each other, all that, and you're kind of recognizable in that place. So if you say we travel to London, then it would be good to have a photo with the Big Ben, you know, to just to kind of be able to prove that it's a photo from really that country, that place. So plenty of photos with families, friends, going out together, all that. Then maybe statements from those family members, statements from those friends or coworkers, so whoever knows you as a couple and can confirm that. Then usually the ministry is looking at some official documents as well. For example, lease agreements where both of you were tenants. So maybe in the country of origin, you were leasing a flat together. So a lease agreement from that. Joint bank statement or joint bank account, or that you transfer money to each other, that you're kind of sharing expenses as well. And as many proofs as you can get, flight tickets to the same destinations or reservations of hotels or Airbnbs, wherever you traveled, all these kind of documents. And then if you get the file together like this, you can try to submit it and see what the ministry says about it.
Thank you. And the follow-up is what will be your average charge? Like, I mean, I want to find out consultation to getting these processes done on behalf of your client, how much it's gonna cost, you know?
Yeah, this would be best to, if you have some specific question about the pricing or something, then just get in touch with me directly, or just go to our website, submit any of the forms there. I believe this will be shared somewhere as well, because it's not that I'm like not willing to say that, but it's kind of different for every type of visa, because in every type of visa, there is a different process involved, different documents are needed. It takes a different amount of time to get it done. So every visa is slightly differently priced, but in general, we can either do a consultation where we just meet and we answer your questions and then you deal with the case yourself, or we have an option of helping you with the whole application, or then something in between that you already like have all the documents ready, you're pretty confident you can submit the application and we just check all the documents. So it really depends on what exactly you want to get done. So the pricing is different.
So can your company help somebody who wants to move? Sorry, my last one. Your company help somebody who wants to move from his country of origin, who has no employment in Czech Republic, to do that? Can you go through the process for that person? I need just a quick, simple answer, if there's a possibility or not.
Well, there is definitely not a possibility of a short answer with me, as you've probably found out. Now, the thing is, we kind of need to, okay, how to approach this. As mentioned, the Czech Republic is kind of a difficult country to get a visa for, and it also like multiplies with your nationality, because for some nationalities it's easier to get a visa here, say Americans, Canadians. Getting a visa for them is definitely easier than from people from African countries or Asian countries. So it depends on that as well. Generally speaking, we don't really help with finding jobs or finding schools, or if you don't really know what you want to do in the Czech Republic, probably my advice would be not to try the Czech Republic at the first place. Maybe try Poland, or maybe try Spain, France, other countries that might have easier immigration rules, because in the Czech Republic, you always need to have a very solid reason to be here. So if, let's say, for example, just to give you the idea, why we, for example, don't really help with finding schools to people is that when you go through the process for a student visa or student residence permit, there is usually an interview which can get pretty detailed and pretty intense. And one of the main things the ministry is like checking is your motivation to study in the Czech Republic. And if someone found school for you and you're not really invested in the school, the chances that you will get the visa are like significantly lower than if you really know why you want to study this program, why in the Czech Republic. You maybe compare the different countries, different schools. And if the officer at the embassy asks you about that, you can explain like, okay, I've compared universities in Germany, in the Czech Republic, and in Hungary. And in Germany, it was too expensive. The quality was good, but you know why you chose that, and your story is strong. And then you have a chance to get a visa. If your story is weak for whatever reason, then it makes no sense to even try, because you will be just wasting time and money and effort, and the chances are pretty low. Another thing is, as mentioned, that there are quotas in most countries. In Africa and Asia, there are quotas for how many people can apply a year for some specific types of visas. And I will use the example of India, because I know the numbers there. I don't know all the embassies, but in India, there is a quota of 0 people who can apply for an employee card if their employer is not enrolled into some of the governmental programs. So even if the employer is enrolled, the waiting time to get an appointment is around 17 months now. So even if you get a job offer from an employer which is part of the governmental program, you will wait 17 months before you can even go submit the application. So in this case, if someone is thinking about it, so that they want to move here, I guess the best first step would be having a consultation to discuss the options, discuss the motivation of the person, and then decide if it even makes sense to start working together, or to start like looking into some concrete option in more details, or if it makes more sense to maybe try another country, because it will be easier to get the visa there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jan.
Hello, Doc.
Doc,
Please, I have a question. Very simple one.
yeah, please, let me make this announcement, and then I'll take your question. Thank you.
Okay.
We will take some questions. Jan, please, I can see the time is up, but will you be able to take a few some questions before we end? Maybe how many minutes can you cover more? 10, 15?
Yeah, just give me a second, because I was scheduling an appointment for 8 o'clock today,
Okay.
but I believe the person replied that they cannot do it at 8. So just give me a second. I'll just confirm in my email, and then I'll be happy to keep answering. That's why I'm here.
Right.
So give me a second.
Yeah, whilst Jan is checking, please put in the chat a Google form for all participants. Please open this form and then try to fill it. Provide us your feedback. Your feedback is really, really important for us. So we want to share with you this form so you can give us your feedback, and God will bless you for that. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can continue. We'll meet next week. So that's fine. All yours.
All right, Jan.
Please,
yes,
short, please.
Okay. All right, Jan. So as part of the documents for family reunification, do you need to provide the name of your spouse on the accommodation document?
Yeah, simple answer, yes. If you definitely the person. Okay, so 2 things here. The spouse you're bringing, or the family member you're bringing, they must have the same address as you. So you should not have a different address with the ministry, and they should not have a different address with the ministry. You should have the same. And even though it's technically valid, even if you're married and just one of the partners or the spouses is in the lease agreement, technically speaking, the other spouse can live there as well by the law. I would still recommend either having the name of the other spouse added into the lease agreement, or just asking your landlord to sign the proof of accommodation just for your spouse, because it might be very difficult to explain to someone at the embassy, or then even at the Ministry of the Interior, that by the law the other spouse is allowed to live there as well. So it could potentially work, but it might also mean a lot of complications. So if you can get the other name into the lease agreement, or if you can just ask your landlord to sign the proof of accommodation form, then it would be definitely safer and better.
Okay, thank you. And if you have kids, do you need to provide forms for each of them? You know, let's say you have 3 kids as part of family union. Do you need to provide forms for each of them?
You need to provide everything for each of them. So each of them needs to have a separate application form, passport photos, proof of accommodation would need to be separate for each of the kids. Proof of funds would need to be 3 times for the 3 kids. Yeah, they would need to buy 3 health insurances afterwards. So yeah, everything, every person who's applying, even if it's like a newborn child, they always need to have their own applications and their own sets of documents.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have to take the questions that are pending online. So, with respect to learning Czech language, writing the exams, what mode of study would you recommend? A proper Czech language school taking the semester or some learning agency?
With respect to learn Czech language and writing the exams, I guess that means for the permanent residency, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely recommend finding a school or teacher who is specialized in that exam exactly, because from our experience, the exam there are, you know, it's not about just like the amount of Czech you speak, but the exam has specific like approach, let's say, which you might miss if you don't work with someone who's preparing specifically for this exam. So for example, one of our clients said that during the exam, they mentioned that they are not really looking at the grammar, but they're looking at your vocabulary. So how many words you know and how you can kind of understand what's going on. But they're in the first phase, like the A2 exam, they're not really focusing on the grammar. But for example, for the B1, for the citizenship, they're more focusing or primarily focusing on the grammar. So there are things like that, like the small differences, which if you just go through some general course of Czech, you might miss. So I would definitely look for a teacher or a school that specifically prepares for the exam.
Okay. So this one says, assuming the permit of the spouse in Czech Republic is approved, but doesn't have the biometric card yet, and the family reunion permit for the spouse in Nigeria is approved, when will the embassy in Nigeria call the applicant for the visa? Do I need the biometric card before spouse in Nigeria will be called by the embassy?
Okay, is it anywhere in the chat that I could? Yeah, okay. Assuming the permit of the spouse in the Czech Republic is approved, but doesn't have the biometric card yet, and the family reunification permit for the spouse in Nigeria is approved, when will the embassy in Nigeria call the applicant for the visa? Do I need a biometric card before spouse in Nigeria? Well, this kind of depends on, because the thing is, you are submitting the application to the embassy, but the embassy does not make the decision, because embassies fall under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not under the Ministry of the Interior. So basically the embassy only follows the rules or whatever the ministry tells them. So if the ministry tells them you can give the visa for full 1 year right now, they will be able to do it right now. If the ministry tells them wait until to the embassy, wait until we notify you that you can do that, they will wait. But once the embassy writes you that you can go pick up the visa, you can go pick up the visa. So you always need to wait for the embassy to let you know. The thing is that, yes, once the residence permit of the main applicant here has been approved, that's good, and that potentially means that your visa can be approved as well as a spouse, but you could still potentially lose the card if you, for example, don't pick it up or you don't go for the biometrics. So that could potentially also influence the outcome of the other application. But if the embassy already told you to come pick it up, you just can go pick it up.
Some of the questions are repetitive, so I'm picking those that are unique so you can address them. Do I still need to pay social and health insurance when I have trade license and also a full-time job that pays health insurance?
Yeah, generally speaking, if you have a full-time job, then the trade license is always considered a side activity. So you don't have to pay the monthly fees. It just depends how that situation happened, because the authorities, the health insurance and the social security, they need to know that you have both, that you're employed and self-employed. And in some cases, even though they should know, because it's the same authority, both for employment and self-employment, but sometimes they don't know, or they don't realize that, or they miss the information, whatever. So if you, for example, are a full-time employee and you want to get the trade license as a side activity, then always when you go register yourself with the trade license for the social security, you need to notify them that you have the trade license, but you should also always bring your employment contract and tell them, hey, I'm employed, so I want my trade license to be the secondary activity. If it's the other way around, that you already have the trade license and now you got a full-time job, then you should always like actively go to the social security and to the healthcare office and notify them that you got employed. Your employer also needs to notify them, but sometimes it doesn't really work like that. So you should go and notify them yourself, and in that case you don't have to pay the monthly fees. But that can change after you do your taxes, depending on your income. If your income was like low and it was like through the trade license was low or was below some limit, you don't need to pay anything. But if it was above some limit, if it was a high income, then you might need to start paying at least towards the social security, even if you're a full-time employee.
So we can take 2 questions, and maybe if my wife receives a family reunification visa but does not move her at once, what happens? For example, after she receives it, she comes for short stay. What happens after this visa expires and she has to apply again?
Yeah, that's not an ideal situation. As mentioned before a couple times, you always, whatever type of visa or residence permit you have, you must fulfill the purpose of your stay. So if you applied for a family reunification visa, you say that you want to live here with your spouse. But if you actually don't really live here, you maybe come here for 2 weeks and then you leave for 3 months and then you come for 2 weeks. You can technically do it and nothing will happen during this or during the validity of this visa. But if you then go apply for a residence permit, then the ministry might see it as a problem, because you said, hey, I'm getting this family reunification visa for a year because I want to live with my spouse, but then you spend most of the year not actually living with your spouse, then you're not fulfilling the conditions of the visa. So again, it kind of depends on the situation, because you could potentially explain it to the ministry what was the reason, if there was some serious reason because you needed a treatment, some medical treatment in the country of origin or something, so you couldn't really be here the whole time, they would probably understand that. Or if you let the visa expire, you apply for a new one, might be potentially better than applying for the residence permit. So it would be, we would need to discuss the concrete case to be able to find the best solution. But yeah, generally, it's not really good if you get a family reunification visa and then you're not really here most of the time.
One says, if I get dismissed from a learning institution, can I find a job and move to a working visa?
Yes, but again, that was one of the questions that were prepared in advance. The school needs to or has to report that you quit your studies or that they fired you or whatever to the Ministry of the Interior. So the Ministry of the Interior will know at some point that you no longer study. So you should ideally, submit the application for the employee card before the ministry finds out. Definitely before they cancel your visa residence permit, but definitely as soon as possible. So if you get terminated today, but you already have a job, then go to the ministry as soon as possible to avoid any potential complications.
Okay, so we take the last question, and it says that I applied for trade license and use it for work for only 1 month, in addition to my normal full-time job, and then canceled it after 1 month. do I need to pay for taxes, social security, etc. at the end of the year?
This would be best to ask again with some concrete numbers to a tax advisor or an accountant, because generally, yes, even if your trade license was active just for 1 month in a year, you should do your taxes, or you should like deal somehow with the tax office, social security office. But in case you have employment and self-employment, it gets a bit more complicated, because if you're only employed, then your employer deals with taxes on your behalf. So they report everywhere, they calculate everything. They might even sometimes give you some money back from the tax because you might overpay it. All that's done by the employer. If you have also the trade license, generally you should be doing the taxes on your own, and consider both your income from your employer and from your self-employment. But then it depends on the numbers, how much you actually earn, because there is some threshold which if you stay below that, you don't even need to do taxes. You just need to report to the tax office saying, hey, I didn't really have high enough income, so I'm not submitting my tax return, but I made this amount of money, whatever, or I stayed below the limit. But that's something that's kind of individual. I would recommend speaking with an accountant or a tax advisor. We can recommend one. We have a good one we work with, but it's more of a question for them.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jan, for this education. So the floor is now yours to tell the audience if we want to see you, if we want to come for consultation, where can we find you? Your details, please.
Yeah, of course. I mentioned part of it during the whole session already, but if you need any help, we basically deal. Okay, so a bit of the story for those of you who don't know us at all. We started the business, me and my partner Daria, 12 years ago. There was some reasons behind it, and there was a combination of reasons. But basically, we decided that we want to do something for foreigners living in the Czech Republic, because 12 years ago it was completely different. Sometimes when my partner was dealing with her visa application, sometimes the ministry, we waited for 7 months, nothing was happening. So we went to the ministry and they said, yeah, we lost your documents, so we don't know where they are, so that's why we're not doing anything. And we had a couple of experiences like that. Also, real estate agents back then were very different, very unprofessional, and there was plenty of scams, all that. And we didn't want people coming to the Czech Republic to have this kind of like first impression that, you come here and then you get scammed by the real estate agent, then you go to the ministry, they lose all your documents, and like, welcome to the Czech Republic. So we decided to help people with that. And we slowly started. In the beginning, we didn't see it as a business because I was an employee, she was still studying. Sorry, it's been a lot of talking. So we just wanted to see if people would be interested in that kind of help, and if we could actually make it a bit more nice for people moving here to like actually kind of enjoy the process and not need to worry about this. And since then, we've grown to 10 to 15 employees, depending on the season. And we are kind of like a one-stop shop. So you don't need to, if you want to find apartment, we can help with that. If you want to apply for any type of visa or permanent residency, citizenship, we can help with that. If you need to get a health insurance, the private health insurance from Maxima, PVZP, Slavia, whatever, we can do that. So whatever you need, basically, we can do. So that's the whole concept here. So of course, if you need any assistance, we'll be happy to help. The best would be to just go to our website, movetoprague.com, and fill in some of the forms there. You can get in touch with me directly as well. We just have, like, we have a sales team, then we have the team that takes care of the clients. We have the rental team. So there is kind of like a process you go through, but the easiest is either to get in touch with me directly via email, or submit any form and on the website. And ideally, please describe your situation in as much detail as possible. So not just, I want to get a visa, but I'm from this country, I already have this, and I want to get this type of visa, all that. So give us as many details as possible, so we know what the case is about, and we don't need to like exchange like 20 emails just to figure out if we can help or not. And then we take it from there, because sometimes we just meet for a free consultation for 15 minutes, and that helps the people and everyone's happy. Sometimes we do the paid consultation, like a deep dive-in consultation for an hour. Sometimes we help with the whole process. So then it's very individual, but the first step is getting in touch. So please don't be afraid. I don't usually bite, so get in touch. We'll be happy to help.
Hi, thanks a lot, Jan. And I've shared the website, the email, and the contact phone number also in the chat. So thanks a lot, Jan, for the time. We think it's really been educative, and we really thank you for the time that you spent with us. God bless you for that. And thank you also for staying extra. It has really been packed with a lot of questions, so we had to go beyond our time. So sorry for that. We apologize for going beyond that time.
And that's always good. Sorry for interrupt. It's always good if people ask questions, because if they didn't, that would be kind of weird and maybe boring or whatever. So I'm happy we had the questions. I'm happy to stay a bit over the time if it helps to answer everything. So thank you very much for being here. We'll see about the feedback. Maybe the stream or the session was not that good. We'll see about the feedback. Let me know, please, how it resonated with the community, and I'll be happy to join some more time.
Sure. Thank you, Jan, and definitely we will be in touch on that. But to move to our announcement very quickly, our PMM Week celebration continues tomorrow. So tomorrow, we are going to Brno for our games and fanfare. So please make a point to be there. It's taking place Brno. So those from Prague, we are moving. The Prague leadership makes me to understand that we are meeting at the church premises 7:30. So please be there at 7:30. God bless you for that. So we'll be having various events, various games in Brno, and Brno is going to be entertaining tomorrow. So please, let's all join the games. We've come to an end of the online National PMM Week program. However, if you want to support the cause of PMM so that we can also organize such events for you, you can always give online through the COP Czech Ministries bank account. Please indicate the reason or give a remark when you are doing this transfer. The account is currently on your screens, and God will bless you for that. You can donate towards the cause of the ministry of Christ, and God will bless you for that. So please take note of that. We've come to the end of today's session. So without wasting much time, I will call on our Elder Emmanuel Quintin Kofi to give us a closing prayer.
Heavenly Father, we are grateful unto you. We thank you for such a wonderful session today. We thank you for all that we have learned through this immigration seminar. We pray that each and every individual's issue, we pray that would be addressed, oh God, in various forms. Pray that even as we depart from here, we are not departing your presence, but you continue to help us in even every difficult immigration situation. We pray that, Father, may you step in and bring us answers and solutions. and that you put laughter in our mouths. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. We commit tomorrow's journey. We pray that may you lead us safely to Bruno and bring us back safely. We pray that let it be a wonderful session and let your glory continue to be with the church. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Amen.
Amen. God bless you. God bless you all. God bless you for joining, and see you all tomorrow in Bruno.